What's going on here? Anastasia Churkin is in London. Hi there, Nastya. It's a confusing, complicated case. Still not many answers out here yet. What do we know so far?
Well, indeed, Kevin, it certainly looks like the dramatic Novichock saga continues yet again following this on Saturday, this couple being discovered just miles away from Salisbury where the so-called original Novichock poisoning took place, certainly raising lots of eyebrows about what and how could these two alleged poisonings could be connected to one another. And it's certainly now been over 24 hours since this has been declared a major incident by UK officials. However, we don't know how this couple could have come into contact with Novichock, whether or not they're connected to the original Skripal incident. So certainly lots of questions now, and certainly much more serious questions to be addressed now that this is a second Novichock-related case within the vicinity of where the first one happened. And while all of those questions are, of course, yet to be addressed by officials that are now going to be certainly working around the clock to try to figure out what this case is, we do know that some of the connections, of course, between Skripal and this case are certainly already being made.
Based on the evidence we had at the time of the Skripal attack, we would still assert to a very high assurance that the Russian state was behind the original attack. The working assumption would be these are victims of the consequences of the previous attack, or something else, but not that they were directly targeted.
Well, of course, immediately the press headlines also followed suit, dragging Russia back into the spotlight. It didn't have to wait very long for that to occur. And certainly now police will be clearly working around the clock, especially given the millions and millions of pounds that have been dedicated to the cleanup process of the area that was said to have been contaminated in Salisbury, with now the question of whether or not this couple could have come in contact with whatever was left there or in any other way, certainly going to be on the radar.
The U.S. Navy says its second fleet will be back in commission this summer, operating out of Norfolk, Virginia. The fleet, which was eliminated in a cost-cutting move 7 years ago, is being reestablished to counter what the Pentagon calls a rising threat from Russia. At a ceremony in Norfolk on Friday, Admiral John Richardson, Chief of Naval Operations, said, "Our national defense makes it clear that we are back in an era of great power competition as the security environment continues to grow more challenging and complex." Russia's Navy has stepped up patrols in the Atlantic, and both Russia and NATO have been building up forces in Eastern Europe at levels not seen in decades.
$230. That's the amount of military spending last year for each person on the planet. It adds up to almost $2 trillion, or 2.2% of the world's economy. Military spending in China rose the most last year, based on the latest figures from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, or SIPRI. The $12 billion boost leads a 29-year upward trend in Asia. China's $228 billion budget is being spent on some big-ticket purchases. Aircraft carriers don't come cheap. China has bought one and has two more under construction.
These steel pipes will be part of a vast undersea pipeline bringing gas from Russia to Germany's Baltic coast. The Nord Stream 2 project will double the amount of natural gas Russia can funnel directly to the heart of Europe from newly tapped reserves in Siberia. That worries the US, who believe the project could be a security risk.
There has been nobody tougher on Russia than President Donald Trump. Between building up the military, between creating tremendous vast amounts of oil, we raised billions and billions of dollars extra in NATO. We had a very, very severe, we were talking about it a little while, fight in Syria recently.
We are following a developing story in Greenland where global competition appears to be brewing. China has been eyeing the icy territory for years. Now the U.S. and other countries are taking note of Beijing's interest.
China wants to displace the United States as the most powerful nation in the world. One of the things that I learned in covering the Pacific region, I had a military briefing that they told me that they give to members of Congress, and some of the stuff was redacted, but What struck me is that they said to me, look, a lot of the media focuses on North Korea, and but the big fear in the military and from our intelligence agencies is what China is doing to expand their sphere of influence. And when you think about Greenland, Greenland is a heck of a lot closer to the United States than some of the islands in the South China Sea.
The U.S. Second Fleet will be responsible for an area extending halfway across the Atlantic and will include a staff of more than 200.
The biggest threat, obviously, is China. China spies on us more than any other country. It is behind the massive OPM hack carried out from 2012 through 2014. It has, of course, the world's largest population. It will soon have the world's largest economy. Its military is growing rapidly in strength. It even manufactures most of the fentanyl that is killing tens of thousands of Americans every year. Americans assume that this country is on top and will be forever, but could we find ourselves overtaken before we know it, imminently even?
It's been a long time coming. China's first home-built aircraft carrier set sail today, kicking off tests and operational trials.
Saudi Arabia is driving a rise in military spending in the Middle East. A 9.2% increase makes it the world's third largest spender. But the world number one remains the United States. At $610 billion, the US forked out more on its military in 2017 than the next 6 countries on the list combined.
Vladimir Putin gloated his armed forces are ready to successfully counter potential military threats while inspecting Russia's largest war drill since the 1980s. Putin has flown into the eastern Russian territory of Zabakalsky to attend the main stage of the unprecedented military exercises, called Vostok 2018, involving more than 300,000 troops. The president, 65-year-old, arrived on Thursday at the Tsugol range, where he inspected Russian soldiers taking part in the drill NATO has derided as practice for a large-scale conflict. The war games are expected to take place at 5 ranges in Russia's Far East, and in the waters of the Sea of Japan, Bering Sea, and the Sea of Okhotsk, between September 11 to 17. Putin justified the exercises as necessary to defend motherland Russia's sovereignty, security, national interests, and to support allies such as Syria. In a veiled warning to NATO and Western nations, the head of state vowed to strengthen his armed forces and furnish them with the latest weapons and technologies. It is our duty to our country and homeland to be ready to defend its sovereignty, security, and national interests, and if necessary, to support the allies, Putin said. He added, therefore, we will continue to strengthen our armed forces, equip them with latest weapons and technologies, to develop international military cooperation. The drills have caused anxiety across the international community as NATO members grow wary of Russian military activities in the wake of the annexation of Crimea in 2014. Vostok 2018 has also garnered attention in the United States as troops from China, whose military activities have caused consternation in the South China Sea, are set to be involved at various stages. Putin said the war games demonstrate the Russian army is capable of countering military threats, without naming the aggressors. You demonstrated the military prowess, showed your capability to successfully counter potential military threats, Putin told troops at the firing range. He commended them for their high-level performance in the most active stage of Vostok 2018. Military commentators believe Russia is seeking to project power, ward off perceived Western aggression and prepare for the prospect of a global armed conflict by holding Vostok 2018. Keir Giles, a Russian military expert at the UK-based Chatham House think tank, the overall aim of the drill is to prepare Russia for armed conflict with the West. Given the declining and increasingly acrimonious state of relations since Russia's annexation of Crimea, Putin wishes to be as best prepared as possible to prevail in open warfare, Giles said. But Putin played down the threat of Russian militarism, declaring his country a peace-loving state. "We do not and cannot have aggressive plans," the president said. "Our foreign policy is aimed at constructive cooperation with all countries that are interested in it," he added. Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov argued the exercises were justified in the current international situation given aggressive and unfriendly attitudes towards Russia. Giles said Moscow's foreign policy decisions are driven by delusions such as the notion Russia matters and hostile powers are lining up to invade the country. He added, Russia also thinks that the international reactions to its appalling behavior over recent years, including the seizure of Crimea, aggression against Ukraine, causing and abetting untold suffering in Syria, the attempted murder of the Skripals and more, are just more indications of this aggressive and unfriendly attitude by the rest of the world. In fact, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The worse Russia behaves, the more Moscow convinces itself that it needs hard military power to protect itself against notional aggressors.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe Daily News channel. Goodbye and see you again.
Clear, of course, that the extent of the threat to the people living in Salisbury and now Amesbury and in areas nearby seems to be not confirmed, with officials seemingly having different opinions. Some of the connections, of course, between Skripal and this case are certainly already being made.
Based on the evidence we had at the time of the Skripal attack, we would still assert to a very high assurance that the Russian state was behind the original attack. The working assumption would be these are victims of the consequences of the previous attack, or something else, but not that they were directly targeted.
Well, of course, immediately the press headlines also followed suit, dragging Russia back into the spotlight. It didn't have to wait very long for that to occur. And certainly now police will be clearly working round the clock, especially given the millions and millions of pounds that have been dedicated to the cleanup process of the area that was said to have been contaminated in Salisbury, with now the question of whether or not this couple could have come in contact with whatever was left there or in any other way, certainly going to be on the radar. And it has to be made clear, of course, that the extent of the threat to the people living in Salisbury and now Amesbury and in areas nearby seems to be not confirmed, with officials seemingly having different opinions on this.